Here with us today is Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez, best-selling author, professor, keynote speaker, award winner, and former chairman of the Project Management Institute. Antonio, considering you are a global champion of project management and have a formidable background in the industry, with the short time we have today, we will attempt to graze the surface of your achievements and ask about your experiences and then lead the conversation toward you providing the readers of PMtips with your expert advice. But first of all, I would like to welcome you and thank you for doing this interview. We are honored to have you with us today.
Thank you, Anna. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and share a bit of my knowledge and hopefully listeners find it interesting. It's a wonderful opportunity now, people working in projects.
Great. It is said that you have transformed project management into one of the central issues on every CEO's 2030 agenda. Could you tell us what that means for the community of project managers and their future as professionals?
Sure, Anna. So I've done a lot of research based on a personal experience in which I felt like senior managers were not putting enough attention to building project competencies in the organization, training people, certifying people, playing a good role as sponsors. So the project management was not a key topic in the agenda of executives. It's always about innovation, growth, strategy, marketing, branding, but projects, that was something for engineers or IT people, and usually it's not a big topic. So what my focus over maybe 10, 15 years has been to tell these people that actually no, they play a big role, that projects are the enablers of change, and even more now with the importance of change and the need to change of organizations. So they realize that yes, actually projects can make a big difference, and to do that I've focused most of my career in publishing articles and books and in media which are read by executives, not project managers, but executives like Forbes, Harvard's Business Review, Thinkers 50, Peter Drucker Forum. So slowly, but there's quite a lot of attention today on the world of projects by the executives. That's what I mean, Anna.
Okay, wonderful. In an article for the Harvard Business Review, you introduced the hierarchy of purpose, a framework that executive teams can use to better prioritize strategic initiatives and projects. Could you elaborate further on how the application of this framework is beneficial to executives?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working with executives on prioritization for, I think, 8 years now as head of project management office and portfolio management. And I realized that when I started on this, most of the ideas and frameworks were making a lot of sense on paper, that you would prioritize your 150 projects based on criteria and weights, but actually it was not very practical. Reality is much more complex. So I came with a framework which is the hierarchy of purpose, which simplifies the process. And one of the key enablers of prioritization is the purpose of that project and how does it fit the purpose of the organization. So by simplifying the concepts, by focusing on purpose rather than business cases, we all know that business cases most of the time look very good. I've never seen a bad business case. They all look good. But then how can you choose a project just on a business case? The purpose is much stronger, not just for the project, but for the engagement of the organization. That's why I use purpose as a prioritization tool. And yeah, everybody can read the article in Harvard Business Review and get a bit deeper into the framework.
Mm-hmm. You have said every time an organization stops a priority, the organization becomes more focused. Every terminated priority is an opportunity to learn and do better next time. In terms of changing priorities, how difficult is it for managers to make these tough decisions and adjust to the changes that come as an after effect? In the end, how does prioritization affect the overall success?
I think there's a key issue and a key strategic tool, prioritization. It's something that I came across doing my job. I didn't realize when you talk about PMOs, you will think more about building capabilities, methodologies, trainings. But actually, one of my biggest tasks was to help the executives to prioritize, and second, to decide which projects to follow. And it was not an easy exercise because you have to let things go. You cannot do everything. It's hard to make choices. And what I realized is that the more focused the organization was in one or two priorities, for example, the customer service, that's our priority number one. The rest follows. Or we want to be a customer-centric organization like Amazon. Everything is prioritized based on that. So it had to grow the company because everybody knew what was the priority number one. So it's really hard to say I'm going to care about the customers and not so much about other things. But it does has a big impact in the organization. Everybody knows when they need to make a choice in their day-to-day job that the customer is not the one priority. There's another example, Anna, which is very famous in Europe. It's a low-cost airline called Ryanair. And Ryanair, their priority is cost efficiency, not the customer, which is a bit unusual for airlines because the customer was very important. But Ryanair said, no, I don't care about the customer, and I'm not going to treat the customers well. I'm not going to spend any money on them. Just going to care about efficiency. I want that people come to our airlines if they want to fly on time and they want to fly cheap. And they're very, very successful. And there's just one priority, which is the key one.
Mm-hmm. Leaders sometimes make the wrong decisions by prioritizing the wrong thing, and sometimes they do not clearly signal their intent about what matters. In reality, how important is for managers to communicate clear priorities to their employees?
Well, it's maybe one of the top three tasks, I think, for a leader or a manager is the communication piece. And I think often you underestimate the effort it takes to keep everybody aligned, to keep everybody on track, on progress, on goals, on challenges. So I think it's a bit like a coach when you see sports. You see the coaches in the bench, in basketball, in football, and they're always talking to their teams, always talking and things that they've done before, but they keep communication. So I think for a leader today, communication should be one of the three priorities. They should be spending time, and it's not just talking, but it's about listening, asking the right questions to help people develop and help people achieve what they need to achieve in their tasks. So yes, absolutely a key priority, especially in projects where you don't see team every day. In projects, you will meet just once a week. You will impact many stakeholders which are not present. So if communication is important in the day-to-day job, communications is even more important in a virtual world, in a project-based world. Is super important.
Mm-hmm. Since you're the co-founder of the global movement, the Bright Line Initiative, could you tell us what was the main idea behind the creation of this movement? What is its main purpose?
Yeah, there's two big purposes. Brightline was a venture or a project launched by the Project Management Institute when I was the chairman of PMI. And the purpose was twofold. First, we wanted to connect to the senior executives. We wanted, back to the we made this, how can they understand, see the value of projects, And we thought that by connecting strategy, execution, and projects, the tension would be bigger. People will understand better the connection that we try to make. So one is to position projects at the highest level of the organization. Second, we wanted to create a body of knowledge in strategy implementation. There's not much about that, and we still see a lot of failure rates when companies try to implement their strategic projects, their strategies. The numbers are shocking. Some 30–40% don't achieve their goals. So we thought that we can do better, that we can help organizations, governments, individuals with their projects, and that's the second goal of this initiative.
Mm-hmm. In what way does the Brightline initiative help organizations improve their ability to deliver on strategic intent? More specifically, what kind of benefits does this initiative offer those that are responsible for strategy implementation within organizations?
I think there's a lot of resources in Brightline which are available for free. Thinking ideas, articles, best practice. So there's resources that have been built and developed for individuals who want to learn and want to use those techniques and best practice for their own sake. That's how Brightline is helping the community. There's a consortium which is formed by corporations, universities, consulting companies who are providing this knowledge for free. I would just recommend people to visit the site brightline.org, and they will find there a lot of good practice, resources, some principles to apply when looking at strategy.
You are the author of the best-selling book, The Focused Organization. In this book, you introduce a new way of looking at a company through the two very different and often conflicting dimensions, running the business and changing the business. How challenging is it for executives to find the right balance between these dimensions, and how does it affect the strategy execution and its success?
Well, good question, Anna. I think this is one of the most difficult challenges that organizations are facing, leaders are facing. How to get this right is very complicated because there's like priorities for the day-to-day, the business activities. You need to perform, you need to sell, you need to meet your commercial targets, you need to report to shareholders and financials. Analyst if you're in the stock market. So the pressure to deliver in the short term is huge on the executives. But that's not enough. That will not help the company in the long term. We saw that with Nokia, we saw that with Kodak, companies that were successful. At one point they forgot to develop and change down projects and transform themselves and create new products. So it's not possible to create a formula and say, well, 80% of my resources will be on the running of the organization, 20%, that's the right mix. No, there's no right mix formula, but it's very, very important that executives think about this. They don't leave it just by chance, because the inertia of the business, of the markets, will be always the short term. Yeah, and when you're to work in a transversal project which is trying to change the organization, there will be a lot of friction. Resources will always be focused first on the business as usual, the operation. So your time will be very limited to help you change. So it requires your executives to say, no, these 10, 20, 30 resources will only do change the business activities, and we're going to support them. And we're going to run 3 projects, and they will get all the sponsorship and resources to help us build the future. So it's a core topic in strategy implementation that I've researched a lot, and it requires proactive management to address and to make a benefit for it.
Mm-hmm. In your recently published book, The Project Revolution: How to Succeed in a Project-Driven World, you explain how individuals and companies can develop the competencies required to transform and thrive in the new digital and project-driven economy. Is there a formula for the successful delivery of a project, or would you say that it is not that easy to achieve absolute success?
Yeah. From my own research, I strongly believe that there's a formula to not 100% guarantee success in projects, but yes, make the chances very, very high. And the formula is what I call it's in one slide. I'm happy to share that with the readers. We can post it as a download or so. But in one sheet of paper, you can look at 4 big areas in a project. And if you have that addressed and proactively taken care and it's well managed, the chances of success of a project are very, very, very high. And the 4 areas, just quickly to tell you, first is the why. Why do we do the project? Often people start projects without knowing why. You implement the system, but why? You transform your company to be digital, but why? It's the real purpose. Then the second big area is the who. Who's accountable? Who's sponsoring this project? And taking that part, it's absolutely a must. Often projects start with no sponsor or with many sponsors, and then they cannot support you in the change. Then the third block is about the how, the when, and the what. What are we going to deliver? How are we going to deliver it, and by when? So this is the more traditional project management techniques in project management, like risk and scope management, and then you have the soft skills. So that third block is fundamental. And fourth and last area which we look at is where is the project being implemented? How important is the project the organization? Does the organization have competencies and ability to support projects? But we were talking just now about the renaissance. Have the change people have power to change the organization or not? So it's a tool which I use a lot, and in one view can have a feeling whether the project will be successful or not.
Mm-hmm. What kind of advice would you give to those managers who are not prone to taking risks when prioritizing is necessary? How can they exit the comfort zone, start minimizing their priority portfolio, and focus on fewer priorities?
Yes, that's a big challenge I see very regularly, and because either the culture of the organization is risk averse, is often not the people. I think I find people who are mostly keen to learn, and by taking some risk or moving out of your comfort zone, that's the best way to learn. But the culture of the organization will penalize mistakes or will penalize too much risk. So I think it's a question of the individual not being afraid. Of course, there's risk and risk. You cannot share confidential information. You cannot, if you're in the financial sector, make big bets with other money. So the risk that I'm encouraging people to do is developing new skills. Trying, if you don't like to present in public, try to present in public. If you don't understand finance, try to go and understand the budget of your project. So this is the kind of risk that I encourage people, because risk-taking is very rewarding when it succeeds, and then if you fail, it's an opportunity to learn, get better. So do it carefully, but do take risks.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the last question. Antonio, it was a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. The pleasure was nice and mine, and I look forward to seeing the comments of the people. Happy to answer them, happy to get in touch if they want. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I hope we can keep the dialogue.
Yes, yes, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna.